Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
Right, let's get more from Jennifer Kavanagh, a senior fellow and director of military analysis at Defense Priorities. She joins me now live from Washington. You just heard Brian Todd reporting on Trump's assessment, and we're starting to see these satellite images. Based on what we are seeing and hearing, what do you think the impact has been, and when will we get that full picture?
Well, it will be some time before we know for sure how much those underground facilities were damaged and what remains usable and accessible and what has been fully destroyed, as the president has indicated. But I think the bigger concern here is not the facilities themselves, but Iran's stockpiles of highly enriched uranium, which the administration has admitted they do not know where those are. They've likely been moved and scattered around the country, as well as components for centrifuges, which the United States and the international community does not have full transparency on. So the building blocks of Iran's nuclear program remain intact, regardless of what happens to the facilities in the U.S. strikes over the weekend.
Got an animation of how this all unfolded. The B-2's flight was around the world. And we heard more from the Joint Chiefs of Staff yesterday. Can you just explain how this military operation unfolded as we understand it?
Well, as we understand it, there were a large number of U.S. aircraft that were involved. Some of the B-2 bombers took off directly from the United States and flew to the Middle East. Others flew towards the Pacific. The ones that flew towards the Pacific were telegraphed. Observers were aware that these were on their way. The ones flying to the Middle East were undetected. So the aircraft flying to the Pacific were a distraction, intended to suggest that the U.S. was moving aircraft into the position, but was not ready to strike. Meanwhile, the actual strike that was occurring was already well underway. According to the Department of Defense, the U.S. aircraft that dropped these bombs did not experience any sort of fire from Iranian sources, so they were also undetected by Iran. And some of the missiles, the cruise missiles, were launched by submarine. And those were also, so that's another piece of this attack. So there were lots of moving pieces that came together successfully for the operation to proceed as planned. Again, the tactical success of the operation, though, doesn't necessarily translate into strategic success of achieving President Trump's real goal here, which is to end Iran's pathway to a nuclear weapon.
People here in this region of the Gulf, where I am, the Gulf region, are, have raised concerns about radiation and environmental impact that could really impact everyday life here. Should these facilities be very badly hit? In terms of Fordo, here's how the head of the IAEA described it.
Craters are visible at the Fordo site, Iran's main location for enriching uranium at 60%, indicating the use by the United States of America of ground-penetrating munitions. This is consistent with statements from the United States. At this time, no one, including the IAEA, is in a position to assess the underground damage at Fordo.
He said radiation levels, though, are normal for now. That is what they assess above ground. I just wonder, how do military strategists approach this risk?
Well, anytime you're striking targets where there could be nuclear material, there's the risk of radioactive spill that affects the environment surrounding the water, the air, et cetera. In this case, it has been assessed that there is no increase in radiation levels. I mean, that's really consistent with this suspicion that Iran has moved those stockpiles of highly enriched uranium out of these facilities and has now hidden them elsewhere. If that radioactive material is no longer there, then strikes on these targets would have a much lower risk of causing any sort of radioactive spill. But it's certainly something to keep an eye on. If the leakage is underground, it could take some time to be detected.
And very briefly, Jennifer, there are 3 targets that the US has been after and the Israelis have mostly been after. That is Fordow, of course, Natanz and Isfahan. There is a nuclear reactor on the west coast, which is opposite the Gulf region, at Bushehr. Now, as we understand it from the IDF, there have been strikes on the city of Bushehr. No indication as of yet that the nuclear facility there has been struck. How big a deal would that be?
That would be a much bigger deal because that is above ground and there would be a significant risk of radioactive spill, especially into the nearby waters. That is something definitely to watch. The United States did not strike that target. There was never any discussion about striking that target. Israel so far has operated, has been willing to take on a significant amount of risk. And so I think if any actor were to strike that target, it would be the IDF and not the United States.
Jennifer.